to talk about 6 things I wish I had known when I started playing the guitar when I was a kid. Number one, the capo. The capo, like you saw me use just a moment ago, is a tool that's on tons of those recordings we heard when we were a kid. I remember when I was a kid, I'd be trying to figure out these songs, and I just couldn't get the hang of it. And it was years later that I found out, I'd read interviews like with Glenn Campbell and some of these guys that played on a lot of these sessions that on all of our popular songs, that they were using the capos on tons of that stuff. I remember years ago I was trying to figure out Aqualung, and I was doing something like this. Aqualung, my friend, don't you start away uneasy. You poor old son, you see, it's only me. And I figured out with those little hard chords, it didn't occur to me that he had just had a capo on the first fret, third fret, and he was. Anyway, I should have known, but I didn't, and it was years later before I figured out that the capo was used on a lot of these songs. So that's number one. The second thing is, I wish I would have known that there were so many different ways to tune the guitar. A lot of those old recordings had altered tunings, open G tuning, dadgad tuning, open E, and so I didn't know for years that Duane Allman used open tunings, and so forth. And my favorite story is about that is the song called "Rain Song" by Led Zeppelin, which is on Led Zeppelin Houses of the Holies. I loved that song, and I tried to play it, and I remember, of course, this was in the 70s, and I'd try to play it, and I'd get parts of it that sounded pretty good, and I'd get kind of frustrated and tired of trying, and I'd leave it alone, and I'd come back a couple of years later and try it again, So this went on for a long time, and this was back before all the tabs and magazines and all the music was available, you see. So it was around the early 80s that all these magazines started coming out with tablature and the notation for the popular songs. And so I started subscribing to all these magazines. And about that time I started teaching a lot in probably the middle 80s. And this is I swear this is the truth. I remember I kept working with Rain Song, and so I finally figured it out, and I thought, well, I'm gonna sit down and I'm gonna write this out in tablature so students can read it and I can share it with my students. So I was so proud because I wrote that. I had that thing figured out. I wrote it out. It had all these Harry chords, It had all these crazy jazz chords, but I figured it out. And I swear, that next morning I got my monthly Guitar for the Practicing Musician magazine in the mail, and I opened it up. There was Rain Song all written out beautifully, and it was an open tuning. And I sat down and I was playing it within minutes. The fingering was so easy, and it was the day after I had finally conquered that song. I thought I'd conquered it. But then when I said, I can't believe this is so easy with the open tuning. So that's tip number 2 is you'd be surprised how many of those songs have open tuning. A lot of the Led Zeppelin, a lot of the Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, Neil Young. I did the same thing with him. I tried to figure out his songs, and a lot of that stuff was open tuning. So that's tip number 2. Okay. Tip number 3, sheet music. Now, it's better now, but when I was growing up, don't presume that when you see a song, don't presume it's written in the right key, because there's a good chance that it's not. As a matter of fact, that has a lot to do with the tuning. I remember when I was a kid, I had the Beatles book, and I tried to work out these Beatles songs, and I thought, and Helter Skelter, Helter Skelter was, I saw the sheet music written in E flat. E flat, I said, it doesn't sound like an E flat, because E flat, within E flat, you can't utilize your open E strings. But I would see all these songs written in E flat, but come to realize that some of these guitar players had tuned everything down a half step where it sounded like E flat. So so the people that wrote these songs out for the publishing company were piano players, and they weren't guitar players, and so they would just write out what they were hearing was E flat, or it might have just been that they was doing a key that was easy for them. So I kind of always had it in for the piano players because they kind of ruined me as a young man trying to play songs in E flat that are supposed to be in E. 'Cause I struggled with that a lot. But now you can find sheet music that's pretty accurate. But even today, you got to be careful because some of it's very simplistic, and it's not really using the wrong chords. They'll have pictures of the chords, and like they'll put a little diagram of the A chord. The one like there's only one A chord. Well, there's a lot of ways to make every chord. So just because I always kind of envision some of these piano players just having a little chord book and just stamping in the first A they see on there. So I might be a little biased about that. So that's something. Point number 3 is sheet music. Now, point number 4 is similar. It's suspicious chords. What I mean by that, if you're playing an acoustic, especially on acoustic music, if I see something like an E minor 11th, or an E minor 11, or house. Yes, E minor 7 flat 5 or something like that. Now you'll see that in jazz, but if it's acoustic music and pop music, chances are the reason they've got those altered tones is because they're playing a chord that has some open strings. For example, in the F with the flat 5. So if I saw the sheet music, I'm saying, oh golly, let me figure out how to do that. But what's happening there is you've got a couple of open strings. So a lot of those chords that look real complicated sound that way because they're utilizing open strings, and it just so happens that those notes are the notes that give it that particular color. So that's another tip. Okay. The next thing I wish number 5. The next thing that I wish I had known when I was a kid before I started was roots music. When I was a kid, I listened to the radio like everybody, and fortunately there was a lot of good music on the radio because the 60s was such a renaissance of good music. A lot of you had your Beatles and the Rolling Stones and the Animals, and then you got into progressive rock like Genesis and Yes, and some of the stuff was really good music. But as I got older and started working at a music store and started seeing these magazines, I started seeing these names that kept coming up over and over: Django Reinhardt, Charlie Christian, Chet Atkins, and I started realizing that a lot of these guys that were that were around before I was even born were really, really good. And I wish I had gotten into those guys at a lot younger age, because I think the danger of playing contemporary, just being influenced by your contemporaries, is that you're going to sound kind of like everybody else. So if you'll go back and study the root music, study where it all began, Robert Johnson, Mississippi Fred McDowell, and Merle Travis, Doc Watson, if you're into bluegrass and stuff. All of these guys have so much to offer, and I just wish I had gotten into roots music at a younger age. All right. Now, the 6th thing that I wish I had done when I was starting off is realizing, and I don't want to sound bad about this, is realizing you're better off to learn to be a solo musician. Whenever you play guitar, learn to sound good by yourself. Don't count on being in bands, especially as you get older, because bands come and go. Yes, you have the Rolling Stones have been together for 100 years, but that's not the norm. If you really love music and really like playing a lot, the truth is you're going to have a hard time finding other musicians that are as dedicated as you are. And not only that, you're going to have a hard time finding musicians that have the same taste in music that you do. If you're in a band, there's going to be a lot of compromise. There's going to be songs that you just love and want to play, and they're not going to be interested in playing it, or some of them are not going to be capable of playing them. They're just not interested enough to learn them. And if you play as a soloist, you're more likely to get gigs and more likely to make more money, to tell you the truth. And not only that, when you go to a party, even if you're not a professional, you go to a party, You don't want to just play the intro to Sweet Home Alabama, and then play the intro to Walk This Way. You see that a lot. Probably 90% of all people that play guitar really don't know the songs all the way through. If you put them on the spot to do a show for an hour, they'll be hard pressed. So you need to be a solo guitarist and build up a repertoire. Always be prepared to have at least 3 hours of music in case you get a gig. You'll be surprised how many musicians can't do a 3-hour gig and they've been playing all their life. Okay, so that's six. That's six. Yes, that's 6 things I wish I'd have known when I started. Bye.